Please help me reach 7,000 subscribers. In the quiet heart of Seoul, where glass towers rise above narrow alleys, a man of immense wealth stood before a test of faith. Han Jun-seo, a reclusive millionaire known for his precision and mistrust, adjusted his cufflinks and glanced at the open safe in his study. Inside, bundles of crisp $1 bills, velvet boxes filled with jewelry, and gold watches shimmered under the morning light. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the city beyond the window. Every surface gleamed. Marble floors, glass walls, a polished piano that hadn't been played in years. It was a house of perfection and loneliness. Behind the half-open door, Han Jun waited hidden in the shadows. His jaw was tense, eyes sharp. For years, people had taken from him, friends, partners, even family. He had built this empire brick by brick, trust by trust, until there was none left to give. Today was different. Today, he wasn't testing numbers or contracts. He was testing Yoon-hee, the woman who cleaned his home, bowed politely and left without a word. For months, her calm composure had unsettled him. No greed, no flattery, just quiet decency. Too quiet, too perfect. He had instructed the cameras to be turned off for an hour. No one else knew. The safe stood wide open, temptation glowing like a secret waiting to be broken. As the clock ticked closer to 9 a.m., Han Jun's heartbeat echoed in his ears. The test wasn't about money, it was about belief. Could goodness still exist in a world that had taken so much from him? And then faint footsteps echoed through the corridor, the maid's gentle steps. The moment had come. Every morning before dawn, Yoon-hee walked through the quiet streets of Gangnam, her coat pulled tight against the chill. The city was still half asleep, cafes unopened, buses half empty, yet her day had already begun. She arrived at Han Jun's mansion before sunrise, slipping off her shoes at the entrance, bowing toward the empty hallway, and starting her routine in silence. At first glance, she seemed ordinary, a woman in her early 30s with tired eyes and soft hands. But her calmness hid a storm she never showed. After losing her husband in a factory fire 5 years ago, Yoon-hee became the sole provider for her 2 daughters and her ailing mother in Busan. Every paycheck she earned was split 3 ways: school fees, medicine, and rent. Nothing left for herself, not even dreams. Her life was a cycle of sacrifice, wake before the sun, work until her body ached, sleep beside the phone in case the hospital called. Yet she never complained, never spoke of her burden to anyone. In the mansion she moved like air, present but unseen. Other maids had come and gone, but Han Jun noticed her consistency. No mistakes, no excuses, no gossip. Her uniform always spotless, her manners always precise, bowing slightly before entering each room, whispering "Josim Suroje" carefully to herself as she handled his expensive belongings. Still, he couldn't understand her. Was she truly that honest, or just clever enough to hide her greed? And he, meanwhile, thought little of the man she worked for. To her, he was just another closed door in a house full of silence. She cleaned his trophies and his bookshelves, dusted his piano keys, and sometimes, when no one was around, she'd whisper softly to herself, "One more month. Yoma, please stay strong." That day, she didn't know that her quiet prayer was about to collide with a test she never asked for. The morning sun slipped gently through the glass windows of the study, laying warm streaks of gold across the floor. And he entered, carrying her cleaning cloths and a small silver tray. She bowed slightly toward the empty desk before beginning her usual routine, dusting, wiping, arranging. Her motions were quiet, almost rhythmic, like someone who found peace in repetition. But then she froze. The safe, heavy, steel, and always locked, stood wide open. Inside, neat stacks of 50,001 notes shimmered under the light, along with delicate jewelry and polished watches that reflected her startled face. For a long moment she didn't move. Her hand trembled slightly on the duster. She looked toward the hallway. Silence. No footsteps, no cameras, no voices. Her heart began to pound. "Why is it open?" she thought. Was this a mistake? Or something else? Her mind spun with possibilities. That money could erase her debts, pay for her mother's surgery, send her daughters to better schools. Just one bundle could change everything, and no one would ever know. Yun-hee stepped closer, her reflection glimmering in the polished metal of the vault. She stared at the fortune, her throat tightening. A tear welled up, not from greed, but exhaustion. Life had tested her too many times already, but then she took a deep breath. Slowly, she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out not her hand but a small cloth. With gentle precision, she began wiping the edge of the safe, careful not to disturb a single bill. Her movements were steady, respectful. The only sound in the room was the faint rustle of fabric. Then from another pocket, she took out a worn photograph. Two young girls smiling brightly beside an elderly woman in a hospital gown. She held it with trembling hands, whispering softly, "Yama, please wait for me a little longer," after a pause. She kissed the photo gently, placed it back in her pocket, and with a quiet sigh closed the safe door. She bowed her head for a moment, perhaps a prayer, perhaps relief, before turning back to her work as if nothing had happened. Hidden behind the corridor, Han-jun's breath caught in his throat. His test was over, and his heart wasn't ready for the result. For several minutes after Yun-hee left the study, Han-jun couldn't move. He stood frozen in the corridor, staring at the now closed safe, as if it had just revealed something far greater than money. His heart was pounding, not from anger, not from disappointment, but from something he hadn't felt in years. Shame. He had expected hesitation, maybe a flicker of greed, perhaps even betrayal. But what he saw instead was reverence. A woman who faced temptation with humility, who whispered to a photograph instead of reaching for wealth. It shattered the wall he had spent his life building around himself. As he stepped back into the study, the air felt different. The safe, polished and untouched, almost seemed to accuse him. "You were the one being tested," it seemed to say. Han-jun sank into his chair, pressing a hand over his eyes. His thoughts raced back to his past. The business partner who had stolen millions, the friend who sold his secrets, the ex-wife who had left with half his fortune. Every wound had built a layer of distrust. Every betrayal had turned him colder. He had stopped believing in sincerity, in people, in goodness itself. But Yun-hee's quiet strength had undone him completely. She didn't know she was being watched, didn't act for praise or reward. Her kindness had no audience. It was pure, and that purity hurt. That night, he couldn't sleep. The ticking clock on his bedside table echoed through the silence of the mansion. Each tick felt like a reminder of what he'd lost and what he'd just witnessed. He turned on the lamp and stared at the reflection in the mirror. The face looking back wasn't the powerful Han-jun Seo the world respected. It was a lonely man who had forgotten how to trust. By morning, his decision was made. It was no longer about the test. It was about redemption. And for the first time in years, he picked up his pen, not to sign a contract, but to write a letter. The next morning, the air in the mansion felt lighter, almost unfamiliar. The usual silence had a strange warmth to it, as if something within those walls had quietly healed overnight. Yun-hee arrived early, as she always did. She placed her umbrella neatly by the door, slipped into her house slippers, and tied her hair back into its usual neat bun. When she stepped into the kitchen, she paused. On the counter, beside a vase of freshly cut lilies, lay a crisp white envelope with her name written in elegant Hangul, Yun-hee. Her brow furrowed. She wiped her hands on her apron and picked it up carefully, glancing around. The house was still. She opened it. Inside was a folded note and something that made her breath catch. A check, unsigned but blank, bearing Han-jun Seo's signature at the bottom. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the letter. The handwriting was steady, formal yet strangely gentle. Integrity is priceless, but so is peace. You have given me both. For your mother's health, your daughter's education, and for the strength you carry so quietly. Please accept this, not as a reward, but as gratitude. A tear slipped down her cheek, then another. The room blurred as her knees gave way, and she sat on the nearest stool, clutching the letter to her chest. For years, she had lived expecting nothing, no kindness, no help, no relief. And now, a man who barely spoke to her had seen the one thing no one else did, her honesty. She placed the check gently back inside the envelope, then bowed deeply toward the empty space, whispering through tears, "Gamsahamnida." Truly? In that quiet kitchen, for the first time in years, she let herself cry freely. Not from pain, but from the feeling of being seen, understood, and valued. And as sunlight filled the room, the lilies beside the letter swayed softly, like silent witnesses to a kindness that had finally bloomed. 3 days later, Eunhee's modest home in Busan filled with the aroma of simmering soup and the faint laughter of her daughters. The apartment was small, peeling wallpaper, mismatched furniture, but it was full of warmth. That afternoon, a sleek black car pulled up outside the old building. Neighbors peeked through their windows, whispering curiously as a tall man in a grey coat stepped out, holding a fruit basket and a brown envelope. Eunhee opened the door, startled. "Director Han!" She gasped, bowing quickly, her hands nervously wiping on her apron. He smiled faintly, the first genuine smile he'd shown in years. "I hope I'm not intruding." Inside, he sat at the low wooden table, his expensive suit almost out of place against the humble surroundings. Her mother bowed weakly from her chair, and the two little girls, curious and shy, peeked out from behind the curtain. Han-jun placed the envelope on the table. "This is for your new home, somewhere safer, closer to the girls' school. And this," he paused, handing her a folder, "is your new position, head of household operations. Full benefits, flexible hours. You deserve stability, not survival." Eunhee's lips parted, but words refused to come. Tears welled again, glistening under the soft afternoon light. She bowed deeply, almost trembling, whispering, "I don't know how to thank you." Han-jun shook his head gently. "You already did," he said. "When you chose honesty over need." For a moment, silence filled the room, not awkward, but peaceful. The kind that speaks louder than words. As he prepared to leave, the youngest daughter ran forward, holding out a small handmade bracelet of colored thread. "A jushi for you," she said shyly. Han-jun accepted it, his voice soft. "It's beautiful. I'll treasure it." When he stepped back into the fading sunlight, he looked up at the sky, a pale blue Seoul evening drifting over Busan rooftops, and for the first time in decades, his heart felt light. He had come searching for proof of honesty and had instead found redemption. The following week, the mansion stood as still and spotless as ever, yet something within it had changed. The air carried a calm energy, the kind that follows a storm that has finally passed. In the study, the once open safe now rested firmly locked, its steel surface gleaming beneath the chandelier. Han-jun stood before it, staring quietly. Where he had once seen a symbol of distrust, he now saw reflection of a man who had finally learned the value of truth that no money could buy. He remembered Eunhee's bowed head, the trembling in her hands as she read his letter, and the bracelet now tied around his wrist, a fragile string of color that somehow felt stronger than the metal locks on his vault. The richest hearts aren't those filled with wealth, he thought, but those that remain pure when no one is watching. That night, he walked through the house without his usual guarded eyes. The maids greeted him with soft bows, and for once he returned them with warmth. It wasn't grand or loud, just a quiet nod, a small smile. But it was enough to be noticed. In another corner of the city, Eunhee's daughters were laughing as they unpacked boxes in their new home. Her mother, frail but smiling, placed the letter in a small wooden box, a reminder that integrity had rewritten their fate. The story's lesson echoed silently between them. Sometimes the greatest test isn't in how much we can earn, but in what we choose to leave untouched. Sometimes the smallest act, a closed safe, a simple choice, can heal a broken soul, and in that truth, both their lives had found something beyond money, peace. If this story touched your heart, take a quiet moment and remember that honesty still breathes in the smallest corners of our world. Sometimes the most powerful choices are the ones made when no one is watching. If you believe kindness still matters, tap the like button, share this story, and subscribe to Soul Stories of Kindness. Your single click helps more people believe in the good that still exists. Tell us in the comments, do you think honesty still has a place in today's world? What would you do if the world turned its back and no one was watching? Because sometimes one small act of integrity can change not just a life, but a heart.